What up, guys? Welcome to the Son of Wanda. Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 9 has arrived, so let's conversationalize. Alright, guys, so I think I'm just going to be jumping into spoilers headlong in, because this was a pretty big episode, so be warned. But, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this is the Ventress episode. Ventress is back. Ventress has arrived. This episode, all about Ventress. Now, this was teased at the end of the last episode when you could clearly hear Ventress's theme music playing at the end of that episode. And so it was pretty obvious that this would be the episode. This next episode would be the one where Ventress appears. Now, I was appreciative that this was the one where she appeared, because even though it was obvious that that would be the case, there still have been other shows where they'll tease a character by the end of it, and then it'll take 3 more episodes for that character to actually show up, and it gets very annoying. It happened in She-Hulk, but this episode actually made good on the tease for once, so that was nice. So we start out, Omega's playing with Batcher, her alien dog creature, and Batcher runs into a cavern, and he senses something off. Omega walks in the cavern. She sees a ship there, and sure enough, Ventress walks up behind her. And so then the Bad Batch come, Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair, and they see Ventress pulling Omega out of the cavern. Ventress hasn't hurt her Omega or anything, but she's made her presence known. Now keep in mind, this is the first time we've seen Ventress chronologically since the end of Clone Wars, or the end of Season 5 of Clone Wars. That was her last appearance when she helped Anakin figure out who was the real person who framed Ahsoka, blah, 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 whole story there. Go check it out if you want to. End of Season 5 of the Clone Wars, the last arc there about Ahsoka, but that was the last time we saw Ventress. So this is a pretty big moment, getting to see her again. Nika Futterman, I believe, is the voice actress's name. I hope I'm not butchering that completely, but she is the voice actress who has voiced Ventress, and she does such a great job. She's still rocking it in this episode, so I love that. And so yeah, it's a pretty big deal that we're seeing her again. I realized kind of throughout this episode, after all this, a lot of mediocre Star Wars content we've been getting, I kind of missed Ventress. I'm glad she's back. And I actually think that this episode really did something interesting for her character. I think if you've seen the Clone Wars and you know all the mess that she went through, and being the apprentice of Count Dooku, being a Sith assassin, starting out about as evil as you could possibly get, moving on from there, and slowly redeeming herself, to see her in this state and this position in this episode is actually very interesting. So, obviously she was Fennec's contact, the one that Fennec wanted the Bad Batch to meet in order to learn more about what an M-count was. In the last episode, Fennec Shan's contact, and Ventress now has arrived on Pabu. This is taking place on Pabu, the planet that's supposed to be, not be able to be found by anybody. Ventress found it. So, right from there, I was just okay, well then that means that the Empire can find the place too. If Ventress can find it, the Empire definitely can. And it's supposed to be the peaceful paradise planet that nobody's able to find or bring war to. That never turns out well, especially if you've seen Clone Wars. But they don't actually say how Ventress found out where the planet was. She said she had her ways. I don't know what that means. She has the Force, so maybe she used the Force. That actually might make sense. She may be able to sense the M-count or something. But speaking of M-count, Ventress does explain that M-count means midichlorian count, and it's in your blood, and depending on how many you have, the more potential you have to be Force sensitive. And so she reveals this to Omega, and Ventress just wants to know why they want to know. The Bad Batch want to know about the M-count thing. And, basically it's revealed, of course, Omega is being hunted by the Empire. They need to know why, and apparently it has something to do with her M-count. All the stuff the audience already knows. And so Ventress is well, bye. Peace out. She basically, in her mind, she did her job. She told him about what the M-count was and she's going to leave. but Omega wants to know more, wants to fully understand this whole M count thing, and if she does have the potential to be force sensitive, she wants to know if she can unlock that potential, and she just wants to know more, and she feels like Ventress could possibly teach her. And so right from there, I'm like, okay, yeah, we're kind of getting a whole semi-Jedi training sort of thing going on, even though Ventress is definitely not a Jedi. She still seems to be in bounty hunter mode. And again, if you don't know, Dark Disciple was a novel that was written after season 5, or season 6 probably, of the Clone Wars. Way before season 7. And it was basically a compilation of, it was a bunch of unfinished Clone Wars episodes made into a novel. And it continued Ventress' story from season 5 of Clone Wars about how she fell in love with a Jedi named Quinlan Vos. And by the end of the book, spoilers for the book if you haven't read it, but she actually dies. She dies. She gets zapped by Dooku with Force lightning, and that somehow kills her. Now, a lot of other people have had, why are you bringing another Star Wars character back from the dead? Why do you keep doing this? I think, personally, that I am 100% okay with this decision to bring her back. In fact, I wanted that to happen. Because for a long time, I was like, oh yeah, well, I really, I would think of situations where, oh man, that would be really cool to see how Ventress would play into this if she were here, post Clone Wars days. And then I remember, oh right, she's dead. She died in the Clone Wars in a book. I'm really upset at that. I was really upset at that because it's like you take this character that everybody knows from Clone Wars, an animated cartoon that a lot more people would have seen rather than reading a book, especially a novel, and you kill her off in a novel. It never made sense to me. And so bringing her back, I think, was a very wise choice, and it offers some pretty serious story potential. And I actually do think that they're already tapping into that potential with this episode, with what they do with Ventress' character. We don't get really any information on how she survived Dark Disciple, or if those events are even still necessary. Now, the people behind the show have said that the events of Dark Disciple are still canon, but they don't really make any direct references to them in this episode. They don't really explain anything of what happened to Ventress between Clone Wars and this episode. It's basically nothing. But we do get a kind of, like I said before, a full kind of character journey with Ventress that I really did enjoy seeing. So, Ventress actually agrees to teach Omega a little bit, see if she really is Force sensitive, test her in that way. And it's kind of funny because Ventress makes a really big deal about it at the beginning, I've been through a similar test before, and you might not be ready for it. It is hard. And then throughout the episode, and even by the time you get to the end, it's what was the super hard thing? What was the thing the scary thing that Omega was gonna have to face by the end of her journey? Just felt really short and not as impactful as you were expecting it to be, concerning Omega's journey to test herself to see if she is really does have a potential with the Force. But Ventress trains her, and then the Bad Batch realize, oh, this chick was a separatist assassin, a Sith assassin that destroyed a lot of people and did a lot of really terrible things. And so, of course, they're realizing oh, this is really bad. And Ventress sort of has her do a Karate Kid thing where she stands on the top of a rock with one leg with her arms out, balancing a fruit on her head or something. And she fails that pretty much. And as the episode's going on, it does feel very similar to Yoda training Luke on Dagobah. There's some similar beats there, and we'll get to some of that later. But then Ventress sees that the Bad Batch have discovered her, or who she really used to be, and she sends Omega away to go pick a flower as her next test. But it seems like it's really just for the purpose of getting Omega free of the battlefield, because Ventress knows what's about to go down. And so the Bad Batch confront Ventress, and they're like, hey, we know what you did. We want you to leave now. And Ventress is like, no, I'm not going to leave. I'm here to stay until my job is complete, basically. And Wrecker's like, yeah, that's not happening. And so they go in for a brawl. And, here's the thing. Too many times in previous media, Star Wars, just a bunch of Disney stuff, they'll have the women show up the men just because they're women, and it won't be an actually realistic situation or fight. In this case, I think this is actually an exception to the rule. I knew immediately, and I knew even when I saw the trailer, that, okay, if Ventress is gonna fight the Bad Batch, she's going to kick their butts. Like, there is no, will she, might she actually win? No, she's going to kick their butts, because we've seen what Ventress can do from the Clone Wars. If you can hang with Obi-Wan and Anakin, then you can decimate the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch are great. They're super skilled. They're an elite clone, basically like a clone SWAT team, clone Navy SEALs. They got this. But not when it comes to fighting Force wielders. And they've actually not fought a Force wielder. They chased Padawan Kanan Jarrus at the beginning of the first season, but they didn't really fight. I mean, I guess they did fight him a little bit, but not to this scale, not to this level of expertise that Ventress has. And so, yeah, Ventress doesn't even pull out her lightsaber at first. She just uses the Force to pull their guns away from them. And so then she goes into a hand-to-hand fight with the Bad Batch. And yeah, again, we've seen her what she can do in Clone Wars. And honestly, Hunter and Crosshair specifically are able to do, it's a really good fight, I think. It's a well-executed fight. It looks really great. There's a lot of good, I guess you could call it animated choreography. But yeah, it looks really great. And yeah, Hunter and Crosshair specifically are really able to hang with Ventress. Kind of blocks a lot of her shots. But at the end of the day, she just prevails on all of them. And then she ends up pulling out her lightsaber and then really defeating them. And then by the time Omega gets back, it's like, what are you guys doing? Why are you fighting? And situations calm themselves. And yeah, it just, again, there was no world where the Bad Batch were going to win that fight. It just wasn't going to happen. Everybody knew that it's just the general rule. You pair a bunch of even bounty hunters, non-Force wielders of any kind, whatever you are, against a Jedi or against a Force wielder, especially to the power level of Ventress, it's just not gonna happen. So I'm really actually glad that they did not depower her in any way, and that they put her full abilities on display, and I was appreciative of that because it makes sense. It's lore accurate. I would rather them be lore accurate than have the Bad Batch beat her, and then it's like, what? How would that even, what? No, I don't want that. Ventress 1 totally makes sense. Yes, she uses a yellow lightsaber in this episode. We don't get a ton of lightsaber action. It only comes out 2 times. But, again, I'm not really mad at that. I think the way they use Ventress as a character in this episode is more important than, how much of, the lightsaber action and, the combat stuff we see of her. And I do think the combat stuff we see with her is very good. But then Omega has a conversation with the Bad Batch. She's like, well, I want to give Ventress a chance. I know she did some bad things during the Clone Wars, but I feel like we should give her a chance. I gave Crosshair a chance. And that is very true. Crosshair's like, well, you're being naive, Omega. And Omega's like, well, I gave you a chance. And that is true. Crosshair has done also some terrible things. So I think there's room for some second, third, fourth, fifth chances here. But what really impressed me more so was seeing Ventress as kind of almost like a full-fledged good guy. I thought that they were still going to have her have more of an edge to her, have at least a little bit of that dark side left in her. And I think there might be a tinge of that in this episode, but not nearly as much as I was expecting. By the time you see her in this episode, you can tell that she has gotten far more mature, far wiser, and she's gotten, you can tell she's gotten over a lot of her trauma and grief that she suffered at the hands of Count Dooku and at the hands of the Separatists and, different people across the galaxy in general. And I think that probably has a lot to do with what she went through in the book Dark Disciple, if those events are in fact still canon. And again, if that's the case, that's fine. I'm just glad we're seeing her now, and I'm glad we're seeing her with some actual character development. I'm glad we're seeing her, after the end of the Clone Wars, in this state of mind that says, I'm okay. I'm just here to help. She didn't even really want payment for anything, which surprised me. Is that she even kind of got over her, selfish bounty hunter phase a little bit. And again, it was just really cool to see a Ventress that was, not who she used to be. That was fully formed, in terms of like mindset and again like escaping her past that always haunted her. And I think that's actually a very cool place to take her character after you see all the things that she went through during the Clone Wars. But Omega, the Bad Batch decided to let Omega still train with Ventress, and then Ventress all of a sudden says, "Hey, we're gonna do your final lesson." I was surprised at that. I was like, "Oh wait, what?" All Omega did was stand on a rock and pick a flower. Like, what? Why is this her final lesson? I have no idea. Ventress takes her out in a boat on the water, in the ocean, and she has Omega stand up and reach out her hand, and try to connect with nature. Because Ventress says, she tells Omega that when someone's connecting with the Force, they can often connect with nature via the Force, so that's a good test to see if Omega's really Force sensitive or not. And Omega's not able to do it, and she gets downhearted, and then she tells Ventress, like, well, I bet you don't even know how to do it. Which is really weird considering she just saw Ventress Force choke one of the Bad Batch and, like, level them out completely. So I was like, I'm pretty sure she knows how to do this, but it was funny that she even asked that question. But anyway, Ventress basically just, watch me. That's her demeanor. And she goes and she does the same thing, reaches out her hand, and she causes a bunch of fish to show up, and she clearly connects with nature. But what do you know? Another giant creature comes out of nowhere. Another sea monster, no less, in the water. And I mean, at this point, it is just comical. How many times does this happen? I mean, yes, and the last time it happened in one of the earlier episodes of this season when they were on the snow planet, the ice planet, and there was that ice worm creature, and Wrecker makes that comment like, why is there always a giant monster? It was funny because it was true, but now it really is just like, how many times are we gonna do this? Like, for real. To just make up some conflict, the writers in the writer's room are always like, I know. We'll get a giant monster. We'll do that again. We're gonna do that again. That's gonna be great. It's like, oh man. It gets monotonous. It really does. But in this case, I do think that they use it in a way that's a little bit more interesting, because you can tell, and like Omega asks Ventress, like, did you summon that thing? And Ventress goes, not intentionally. But you can tell that the little bit of darkness left inside of her from her past did kind of come out through when she was reaching out with the Force and accidentally call that creature. And so the creature attacks a little bit. The Bad Batch try to fight the creature in the Marauder, in their ship, and Ventress just tells them to hold off, stop attacking the creature, and she lets the creature grab her with its tentacle and bring her to the creature's face, and the Ventress connects with the creature and gets it to stop attacking and just go back into the water. And I feel like that was a pretty telling moment for Ventress as a character once again. That she has gotten, like, because Ezra Bridger does that a lot in Star Wars Rebels. He's able to connect with animals and get them to help him in fights even and stuff, certain creatures. And I feel like it's far more of a Force power that I feel is indicative of the light side. It's much more of a peaceful, calming kind of Force ability, where if you are able to connect with the bigger creatures or the more dangerous ones, but in a way that is still calm and at peace with the creature, then it does indicate some light side inside of you. And so the fact that Ventress is able to connect with this giant sea monster at all is pretty telling of where she's come as a character. And again, I really appreciate that. So, end of the episode comes, and then Ventress basically gives the rundown on... Again, I don't know what, like... I don't know if she just took some of Omega's blood by the end of the episode and then used that to actually test how high her M count was. They don't really say. It's just very weird. It's like her goal was to test Omega, but she didn't, like, she kind of tested her, but, like, not really. Like, I don't know what kind of progress they made in terms of the testing. But somehow she has some results, and Ventress tells Omega, sorry, your M count's not that high. You should be grateful that your M count's not that high, because the Empire, they like to hunt people who have really high M counts. And Omega's disappointed, but she tells Ventress bye, and you can tell Omega's grateful to Ventress for helping her at all. And so Omega leaves, and Crosshair immediately can tell, okay, yeah, Ventress, you're lying. And of course she is. Of course she is. You would not set up, especially with what we know about, on Tantus, like Omega's blood being like somehow different than the other clones in relation to her M count. We know that obviously Ventress is lying. And so Ventress does not explicitly say Omega has a really high M count, but it is definitely implied. Like, Ventress tells the batch that, Hunter and Crosshair specifically, that they should be wary. And first of all, they should know, just like I said at the beginning of this review, if Ventress can find this place, anybody can. The Bad Batch are not as safe as they think they are on Pabu. And second of all, if Omega's M count is really that high, or high enough to warrant the Empire's attention, then she needs to be trained by somebody. Or at least that's pretty directly implied. So, I am curious now, because, okay, if somebody's going to train Omega, who's going to train Omega? And so it does cause me to have some predictions for the end of this season specifically, because maybe Ventress will come back and be the one to fully train Omega in the ways of the Force. I think that would be a great arc for her. The wayward student now becomes the wise master. I think that's pretty cool. But, maybe it could be somebody else. But I have a feeling that, Ventress tells the Bad Batch straight up, like, if you have somebody train her, that means you guys are going to have to leave her. And Hunter's like, well, that's not happening. And again, like I've said before, I fully do not expect all of the Bad Batch to make it out of this season alive. I know somebody is probably going to get killed, and it might be Hunter, I feel like he is the kind of character that, the father figure mentor character who would make like a sacrifice and then, unfortunately die by the end of a season like this, especially the final season. And, it might be that causes a situation to occur where Omega's like, okay, I need to be trained, and like for her to leave the Bad Batch and go off somewhere else, and for someone to come and train her who is also Force sensitive. And so Ventress, her parting words, like Crosshair tells Ventress, like, I still don't know what side you're on. She's like, I'm on my own side, typical, I guess, rogue bounty hunter line there. But the Batch does tell her that, well, the Empire will probably be hunting you too. or how come you're not afraid of the Empire hunting you as well? And Ventress is like, well, I still have some lives left. And that line definitely intrigued me. I feel like that was some direct hinting at least something that happened between Clone Wars and this episode. Probably, again, the stuff that took place in the Dark Disciple book. I take it to mean that somebody, like, because she was buried on Dathomir at the end of the Dark Disciple book, and I take it to mean that maybe a Night Sister of some kind, a Night Sister that was left, or maybe the ghost of Mother Talzin, or, well, no, she died. I don't know who it could be. Somebody revived her and possibly gave her, like, used some sorcery, some Night Sister magic or whatever, to give her more lives, and sort of like a cat, like 9 lives kind of thing. And, she only has so many, but if she does die, she can come back. So maybe that's what that means. Or maybe just the witches who come from Dathomir, the females that come from Dathomir, which is what Ventress is. She's Dathomirian, but maybe they just in general have more lives and can die more than once and still come back. Maybe that just happens anyway. I don't know, but I am looking forward to that being expounded upon. Hopefully it will be. But again, as far as the episode goes in general, I really like what it did with Ventress's character. I really like that it gave her a full arc, that we got to see her at the beginning of the Clone Wars, full Sith assassin. Over time in the Clone Wars, she has more moments of, she gets more kind of redeeming qualities, more of those come out. They flesh out her character over time, and then we get to her in this episode, and she has seemed at least to let go of a lot of what was holding her back before and let go of the dark side inside of her. And you can even tell that in just kind of the way she is teaching Omega. Like, none of it is like dark side or anything like that, or even close to as bad as the way Dooku taught Ventress. But it's in a calm way. And even the moment where Ventress, you know, like where Omega's like, I can't do this, I can't connect with nature via the Force, and Ventress does it and shows her that it can be done, was very much a Dagobah moment. It was very much a Yoda teaching Luke how to lift up the X-Wing, and Luke's like, you asked the impossible, and then Yoda does it, and Luke's like, I don't believe it. Yoda's like, that is why you fail.
I don't believe it. That is why you fail.
Such a good line, and I'm glad that they kind of echo that here. But yeah, thought the episode was good for the reason of what it does with Ventress's character. As far as the actual, like, what are we doing with the plot? What are we doing with Omega? Like, how did she really progress? I don't know. I don't know if that was handled the best. What is interesting is that the episode itself is titled The Harbinger, and Harbinger means like a sort of like an omen or something coming that lets you know something is about to happen, like warning you about something. And so I thought that was very interesting, because if Ventress is sort of like a harbinger in a certain kind of way, then that might mean that what's coming later down the line, and she does warn the Bad Batch at the end of this episode, like, the Empire could still find Omega here on Pabu. You're not as safe as you think you are, and somebody needs to train her. So it seems like a pretty big tease for the danger that might come, that probably will come later down the line in this season, but we'll see. But that is my review for Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 9. I thought it was good. Thought it was alright, and I'm looking forward to see what's coming next. But thank you guys for watching. Have a very blessed day. May the Lord be with you. May the Force be with you. Bye! And that's a wrap.